Welcome back to Talk the Walk. With us tonight is Hong Kong Chief Executive Carrie Lam, who is talking with us about her policy address. Mrs. Lam, thank you for coming on back onto the show. So, before the break, we were talking about, I think you mentioned the word puppet of Beijing. So, you have been subject to a lot of these attacks over the past year or since you took office. So, it's very natural for politicians to be subject to attacks. But do you feel that these attacks have become increasingly unreasonable over the past year?
Well, you are right, Raymond. Most political leaders in the course of their tenure will be facing that sort of situation. I think we have seen that, especially in the current situation, when politics becomes sometimes influenced very much by the social media, rather than in the old days where you could have debate and discussion and so on. But I suppose the leader of a Hong Kong Special Administrative Region is unique. She has dual accountability. She has to be accountable to the people of Hong Kong. She has to be accountable to the Central People's Government. And one country, two systems, by nature, is a very unique arrangement. So how I could, as a leader, perform that dual roles well, it's not easy. I can only tell you with 3.5 years of experience that is a very, very difficult task, especially when in a city like Hong Kong, it's relatively more complicated. For example, you compare us with the Macau Special Administrative Region, we are far more complicated. And because we are so open, so free, we are also subject to a lot of external influences, for good or for bad. So with that background, I would say that especially if the chief executive was brave enough to press ahead with some somewhat controversial policies, but in her judgment or in my my predecessor's judgment was good for Hong Kong, then we have to do it. If you look back at history, every time the chief executive made an attempt to press ahead with a policy which was justified, but it had a very strong mainland angle, it's doomed to fail. In 2003, the enactment of local legislation under Basic Law Article 23 to safeguard national security. I don't think anybody could say that this is something wrong, but it failed miserably. In 2012, trying to introduce national education in schools. Again, nobody could say that it is wrong to understand your own nation. It failed. And then in 2014 and 15, when I was Chief Secretary for Administration, I pushed ahead with universal suffrage for the people of Hong Kong to select the chief executive. It failed. So last year, it's more or less the same experience. But now, with the enactment of a national security law, with a very clear exposition of the bottom lines of one country, two systems, and the assertion of the importance of sovereignty and national interests, I hope in future, days will be better.
You always tell people that you have dual accountability, as you've just said. But do you find yourself increasingly difficult to maneuver between this dual accountability or role? Because according to Article 48 of the Basic Law, that the chief executive can or shall also conduct external affairs on behalf of the Hong Kong government. But from my knowledge, your last official trip overseas would be in November last year to Thailand. So are you going on these overseas trips less and less because only because Hong Kong, there's too much on your plate right now? Or is it because you are sort of relinquishing your obligation to sell the brand of Hong Kong to other countries?
Not at all, not at all. Of course, in the latter half of last year, because of the social unrest in Hong Kong, it would not be appropriate for the chief executive to be absent from Hong Kong because things could happen very fast and so on. But my last official trip overseas was actually January this year to Davos. This is my third occasion attending Davos. And actually, before I went back to Davos in 2018, Hong Kong was absent from Davos, this World Economic Forum, for many years. So when I took office in 2017, I put on very high on my agenda is to promote and enhance Hong Kong's international image and her international status. because we are a part of the People's Republic of China, but we are very unique on our own. We are an international city with a lot of connections. So I've been doing a lot of overseas trips during the first 2 years. But then, I have not finished the second year, and then we have this problem. And since January this year, after Davos, it's because of the COVID-19. I would love to do more traveling to promote the Hong Kong brand. I'm not worried about when I go overseas, there will be a sort of critics and overseas media or some protests. We are quite used to that. But it's really because of the pandemic that, not myself, nobody could travel these days. But I'm still doing a lot of webinar and conferences with the outside world.
So since the implementation of the national security law in July, Hong Kong has been under the spotlight of a lot of foreign countries, saying the government and Beijing are taking away the freedoms of Hong Kong people. And you and the Hong Kong government have relentlessly rebuked these claims. A lot of the times you did it on social media, on your Facebook page. So I think most recently you also responded to a British report saying Hong Kong was not right in disqualifying the pan-democratic lawmakers. Do you actually read the comments that underneath your posts? So this is one of my questions, because every time you make a posting, you draw thousands of comments and also likes and dislikes. Do you go into the comments and read them, including the negative ones?
Occasionally. I hope you would forgive me. I just don't have the time. I don't have a time to sleep. So where do I find the time to read all these commentaries? But let me just put that clear, because refuting an overseas government's unfair criticisms on Hong Kong is a very solemn matter. I would not do it on the Facebook post. I only do it on the Facebook post to supplement in a less formal way once an official release has been issued. So coming back to that so-called six-monthly Hong Kong report published by the FCO, is full of unjustified comments. And so the Hong Kong SAR government issued a pretty lengthy rebuttal, midnight. We issued midnight, on the same day, midnight. But then I thought that if I could do a Facebook to provide another perspective, and that perspective and that argument has been deployed in refuting many of the overseas criticisms, and that is double standards. So they are not applying standards in a fair and equitable manner. The three main issues being complained in that UK six-monthly report. One is postponement of election. But the UK government postponed all their local elections by 1 year. In March this year, when the pandemic was not as serious as now, they took the initiative. They even have to enact an emergency piece of Coronavirus Act to postpone the election exactly by 1 year in the same situation as ours. So why do they complain about our situation? When I made the decision to postpone Hong Kong's Legislative Council election on the 31st of July, that was the following day of the day when Hong Kong has recorded the largest number of confirmed cases. It's almost 150 cases. We still have not broken that record. I hope not, touch wood. So this is double standards. And when they said, why do you enact a piece of national security law to suppress freedom? Have you watched James Bond? This MI5, MI6, all this national security law. In a way, many countries inherited it from Britain, right? And then they complain about this and complain about that. My duty is to point out the facts and to defend the position of the country and the Hong Kong SAR.
And I think one of the unintended consequences of the enactment of the national security law is the sanction of you and your principal officials by the United States. So I know that all of you have said that this is something that we have to do for Hong Kong and for Beijing, and there's no regrets. But would you mind telling us if there are any inconveniences in your daily lives after this U.S. sanction, or life goes on as usual?
I just give you this comment. Sitting in front of you is the chief executive of the Hong Kong SAR, who has no banking services made available to her. I'm using cash every day. for all the things. I have piles of cash at home because the government is paying me cash on my salary because I don't have a bank account.
So is this from the beginning that you don't have a bank account?
Of course not. Of course not. But I just want to make it, I don't want to sort of deter people from serving in a public position because it's very honorable in this set of circumstances to be so unjustifiably sanctioned by the US government is an honor. I said it's an honor. All the other 7 or 8, depending on whether they counted the former commissioner of police, we all serve with honor because we are protecting national security, not only 7.5 million people, but 1.4 billion Chinese nationals in the People's Republic of China.
Okay, so I'm afraid that's all the time we have for tonight. And thank you, Mrs. Lam, for coming onto the show again.
Pleasure.
We'll be back for more Talk to Walk next week. Stay tuned.